Do you remember that old movie called RoboCop? Came out in 1987, so it was before all the fancy computer-generated graphics came along. But it was well done, about a robot cop in the future, in the near future, in Detroit, after a financial meltdown and a crime wave. So yeah, if it came out today, it would be called a documentary, not a science fiction film. Here's a clip of it to help you remember.
Your move, creep.
RoboCop.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Great movie. That's the exciting part of today's monologue, because now I'm about to get boring and political. Sorry. You see, the two most serious opposition parties in Ottawa, the Liberal Party and the Media Party, have decided that there's a new scandal out there that delegitimizes the results of the last federal election, the one that gave Stephen Harper and the Conservatives a majority. They want a do-over in dozens of ridings. Seriously. And they blame robots. Not robo-cops, but robocalls. Here's what I mean. According to Elections Canada, in the last election, some people claimed to have received automatically dialed phone calls, you know, the kind that are usually full of pre-recorded messages trying to sell you something, pretending to be from Elections Canada, saying that voting locations had been moved when in fact they had not. Elections Canada and the police are looking into it, and a 23-year-old Conservative political staffer has resigned. But the party is adamant that voter confusion or suppression tactics like that were not part of its campaign. Now, voter turnout actually grew in the last election, up from the one before, up a bit from 58.8% in 2008 to 61.1% last year. Nearly 15 million Canadians found their way to the polls. Every party had people making phone calls, and robot calls too, to get their people out. Every party had lists of supporters they were making sure showed up to vote. Of course, Elections Canada itself did too. If you wanted to find where to vote, it was actually pretty easy to do. But Elections Canada leaked the news of their investigation into these allegedly fake robocalls that were traced to a Conservative staffer who resigned. So where the opposition parties had, resigned themselves to 4 years of Conservative majority rule, some of them are now, well, they have that impossible dream that there might be a do-over, that Harper might have his majority taken away from him. Maybe that there might even be a coalition government of opposition parties again. It's so exciting! Now, it's not the first time that Elections Canada leaked news about a confidential investigation against the Conservatives. Years ago, they tipped off reporters when they went to the Conservative Party's office for a subpoena for documents. It sounds unusual that Election Canada would violate normal rules of confidentiality and privacy to embarrass someone under investigation, not someone charged with anything at that point, not anyone convicted of anything. It sounds funny. Well, it is funny, because Elections Canada relentlessly pursues any complaint against the Conservatives, but actually changes the rules to protect Liberal irregularities. Seriously, I'll prove it. I mean, remember Stéphane Dion? He borrowed an enormous amount of money for his Liberal leadership campaign, but he didn't repay it on time as required by law. He had a massive debt to a businessman from Montreal who had given him 6 figures. Now, this law is important because, of course, in Canada, there's a limit of $1,100 that anyone can donate to a federal politician. And so giving someone a massive loan and not having it paid back on time was obviously an illegal way to skirt that law, right? But Elections Canada didn't mind. They didn't charge Dion or the Liberal Party or the donor. They gave them an extension, and another one, and then another one, for years, literally. Dion didn't even pretend he was complying with the deadlines. He didn't have to, because his friends at Elections Canada were happy to bend the rules for him, because he's a Liberal. In fact, Elections Canada worked with opposition parties to set up an irregular advance poll in the last election. Let me tell you what I mean. Elections Canada is supposed to be neutral, nonpartisan. But at the University of Guelph, a left-wing group affiliated with Liberal and NDP partisan activists somehow set up their own advance poll that they organized. But they managed to have official Elections Canada signs and ballots there that were actually counted in the vote. One of those left-wing vote mob groups, basically the Occupy Wall Street groups called LeadNow.ca, had set it up. If you look at LeadNow's website, you'll see it's run by a bunch of partisans. I mean, there's Ian Capstick, an NDP strategist who also happens to be a commentator on the CBC. There's Judy Rebick, a former NDP candidate herself who used to have her own show on the CBC and now runs a union website called Rabble.ca. There's Jim Stanford, an NDP activist, and my favorite is Ross McGregor of the Tides Foundation, the group that has funded 36 cookie-cutter anti-oil sands extremist groups in Canada. That's who's behind LeadNow.ca. That's who helped organize this very special student voting booth on campus. Seriously, here's a picture of it, the special left-wing activist polling group booth set up by left-wing partisans. Sorry, that's not how it's done in Canada. Stephen Harper or Bob Rae or Elizabeth May, they don't get to decide where to put polling stations. They don't get to decide to organize them or when they're up. When this scandal hit the newspapers, well, Elections Canada admitted it was irregular, but they kept the votes anyways. So that's Elections Canada. They investigate and even sue Conservatives for any scandal, real or imagined. But they either ignore or actually cooperate in election irregularities by NDPers and Liberals. I mean, look, elections are full of shenanigans from all parties. Here's a picture of a Conservative candidate's signs, Marty Burke's election signs, that were either stolen or vandalized in the last election in Guelph, as it so happens. Now, that's illegal. It's vandalism, maybe theft. I don't know, maybe it's an election offense, too. Do you think Elections Canada actually called the RCMP and investigated that one, let alone tipped off the media? No, because Marty Burke was the Conservative running in Guelph. Elections Canada was too busy in Guelph cooperating with the NDP and the Liberals in their special order polling station. Now, I'm not saying I approve of these shenanigans, of course not. And anyone in a democracy whose campaign breaks the rules, well, they're stupid to begin with. There's very little that is truly secret in a campaign, and if news leaks out, as it usually does, of what a campaign is up to, dirty tricks usually backfire in the face of those who commit them. Every campaign engages in rough tactics. Usually they're just unfair, not illegal. It's along a spectrum, I suppose. Attack ads aren't pretty, but they're legal. Politicians even, get this, they even lie. I mean, to become Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien himself promised to kill, scrap, and abolish the GST. But he didn't. Now, was that a lie? Sure. Or maybe just a politician being a politician. I mean, no one seriously said that the election was invalid because of fraud. I mean, if someone lies to you to sell you a car or a house, that's called false advertising or fraud. In politics, it's called business as usual. Voters have to use their wits. Anyhow, back to our scandal du jour, RoboCall. If a law was broken by someone, let them face charges. But even if the wildest accusations do come true, to suggest that the election is invalid shows the desperation of the opposition parties and the media party, and the fact that they still haven't come to terms with the real reasons they lost the election. Voters didn't trust them on the issues. It must be nice to have an excuse for losing the election. Robocalls, confusing people, I don't know, maybe your astrology chart was having a bad day, whatever. Of the 27 ridings the Liberals claimed were called by the robocaller, most were Conservative blowouts, some which had 15% or more margins of victory. Others simply made no sense or no difference, places where the Conservatives lost, even came in a distant third place. So even if the vague allegations were true and these robocalls were widespread, they didn't make a difference in many ridings. They couldn't. But so what? This is about discrediting Harper. It's not really about Harper stealing an election. It's about the opposition stealing the election, just like they tried to do mere days after the 2008 election vote that year. Remember that one? Just after the ballots were counted, the three opposition parties got together and cooked up a plan to form a coalition government, something that none of them had talked about publicly during the campaign. They asked the Governor General to let them be the government, not Harper, who had won the most votes. The media was so excited about it, especially about the involvement of the Bloc Québécois, whose MPs were necessary to get the sufficient numbers in Parliament. Now, we've seen this before. Not winning on election day, but winning through a do-over, or at least whining about it. I don't know, whining to the Governor General, whining to Elections Canada. They're just doing it again now. So look at the excitement by the opposition parties, including the media party. Look at this clip.
Conservatives carried out some dirty tricks in the last federal election.
Even my own riding was targeted by some of these robocalls, the term Nixonian to talk about this.
Coordinated campaign to mislead voters.
Liberal voters were harassed.
The umbrella term dirty trick.
Dirty tricks in more and more ridings across the country.
Dirty tricks during last spring's federal election.
Seriously, comparing this to Richard Nixon, a man who personally ordered a criminal break-in of a Democratic campaign office and then a criminal cover-up of that break-in. And here's the hysteria from the opposition, actually. Do we have a clip of that? Go ahead.
Well, we don't have a smoking gun pointing to Stephen Harper or the Conservative Party.
We are entering into kind of a Nixonian moment in our political culture where all kinds of dirty tricks seem to be possible, all kinds of dirty tricks seem to be encouraged.
In the sponsorship scandal, the Liberals may have broken every rule in the book, But it seems the Conservatives have borrowed a whole new book, a book of dirty tricks.
There was that Nixon quote there, and comparing it to ad scam, the theft of $250 million, that's gorgeous. Seriously, one robocall done by a rogue staffer that had no effect is equal to a criminal offense that caused the president to resign and a scandal of $250 million. My favorite was this morning's front page of the Toronto Star. Look at that headline. Check it out right there. Do you see that? It's the sub-headline. They call it a deck. It's the bottom left corner. Call center operators admit they directed voters across Canada to wrong locations. Wow, the scandal is spreading. So it wasn't just some allegation about robots by a 23-year-old staffer. Here it was, proof. Call center operators, live people, admitting that they directed voters to the wrong place. I love that word, admit. I mean, they're practically confessing to a crime, aren't they? Impeach Harper. I can hear it now. Perhaps the opposition parties have had another summit and are going to ask the Governor General to appoint Bob Rae as the Prime Minister. Except that when you read the Star story, which I try not to do usually, but I did it today, that's not actually what the story says at all. The callers were paid staffers from the Conservative campaign. They weren't pretending to be from Elections Canada. They had official scripts, the ones that were told to read, saying they were calling from the Conservatives. And although some of the calls told people to go to polling locations that, according to one paid call center worker named Annette de Gagné, quote, made no sense or were, quote, way the hell across town, fine. But Ms. de Gagné didn't check if they were false, just that the addresses made no sense to her or they were across town. But if she didn't check, how did she know? I mean, she wasn't just calling her own riding. She said she called around the country. How did Annette know if an address made sense or not? I mean, she didn't actually stop and compare what she was saying on the phone to, let's say, what Elections Canada's website said. Is that it? Seriously, is that the smoking gun? That's it? So 9 months after an election is over, a call center worker says some of the voting locations didn't make sense to her, but she didn't bother to check. She doesn't remember which one. She didn't bother to talk about it until the Star asked her. And here's the main point, she was working for the Conservative Party and was told to identify herself as a Conservative caller. Seriously, is that all they got? This is not Watergate. Look, if there was something illegal here, heck, go get them. One paid caller with a vague recollection. Yeah, that's not exactly the Watergate tapes. But the media party and Elections Canada, they show that they want a monopoly on what campaign tricks are allowed and which aren't. For example, Elections Canada allows people to vote in burqas. Seriously, they came up with that good idea all on their own. Or who knows, maybe some partisans gave them the idea. That's a massive possible source of fraud. They also allow people to vote with just a driver's license as ID, even though you can get a driver's license without being a citizen, of course. But that kind of voter fraud is fine by the liberal media. They probably think it favors the parties of the left, just like voting for prisoners does. So they don't mind when conservative signs are vandalized, but a rumor of a myth, of a memory about a woman who thought a voting booth location across the country didn't make sense to her 9 months ago, well, that's front page news. Sorry, guys. That's not enough for a do-over. No, I'm not that excited about RoboCall, other than the cool name. No, to me, there's a lot more election trickery in the media itself, like on the eve of the vote last year, how the media party, especially the CBC, literally put a cone of silence over the leaked police reports about Jack Layton's visit to a Toronto whorehouse. Remember that one? The Star and the Citizen and the CBC didn't engage in news reporting. They engaged in a suppression of the news to help their hero, Jack Layton. Now, I don't think that was a crime. It's rough politics. You know, Canadians can sort it out. But it's good to see the media party concerned about robots. They give me the creeps, too. Maybe one day the media party will care about voting in masks also, or an Elections Canada bureaucracy that seems to investigate complaints only against Conservatives.